All right, here, Lego in the flesh, doing some commentary for once, just to see how this turns out. So I'll just be commenting on what's happening on the screen right now as best I can. And the first thing I did with this particular project is I started doing the important words. So I have a quote, and I'll unveil more as time goes on. I have a quote and some of the words I want to emphasize. So I'm just building those up in circle format first, because then I want to incorporate all the other words around them later. So yeah, you can tell my general approach here is to the style I'm sort of developing is to make the circular letters first, just in raw format, without cutting anything, without any destructive editing. I'm just giving the general shape and size of the words that I need, and then I have to remember in my head, what am I actually writing? Is this a B or an H or an F? And just based on what I want to write, I'll have to go around and remember what each word and what letter is. So it's a bit of a mental exercise, but it allows me to make very quick and easy changes whenever I see something that doesn't work, or whenever I need to make changes. I don't have to do a lot of rearranging to get the result I want. So these are some of the important words. I forgot one, so I'm just gonna make that real quick. And some of the overall shapes sticks out pretty far, but I know that those are gonna disappear once I cut into my circle, so I don't pay attention to the extra bits that stick out from the words. They don't matter because they'll disappear. So I have my central framing in the center of the page as usual. And what I'm doing right now is I'm just scaling and placing them around to see where they fit and where approximately I decide that the big words are going to be. Once I place all the other text around, I'll have a better idea of how much spacing I actually need between. But for now, they're placed approximately where I think they're gonna end up being. So I've switched layers now, and I'm starting to write the bulk of the quote. And what I'm doing right now is, again, I'm just using rough raw shapes to determine the size and relative placement of the letters. And now more than ever, it's very important that I have a fixed idea in my mind of what every word and sentence actually is, because I'm quickly going to lose track of where and what every letter is, which is why every letter that starts a new word is marked in blue for now. So I'm color coding it to kind of give myself a rough idea of where the next word starts and what it might be. And you can tell that I'm switching layers every so often to kind of rework and reorder some of the big important words. As you can tell, I miss how much that would take up, so I had to move some space. Um, and it's concentric in this case, so that means that the next part of the quote continues on inside the previous quote. So uh, whenever you finish reading one circle, you just move on to the next circle inside. So the quote is going to spiral, almost spiral inside towards the center where I would say the most important word is actually located. Which is why I chose this particular structure instead of, say, some linear Gallifreyan, or maybe some more classic word circles divided in section circles. So this is as always, this is a sort of experiment for me to see how this might look. I'm rarely using the same style twice. So you can see I'm almost finished with the quote, so by now I have a pretty good idea of how much the last piece takes up. So I'm rearranging some stuff to try and think ahead of when I need to actually make the words. I'll need space to fit in the right places, and I'll need some, you know, if something can fit inside something else, then that should happen. So you can tell there are two big important words there on the left, and I'm trying to nestle them into each other from the start, because that's how the space is going to take up. And we're going strong here still. I think it's been about an hour in real time, I think. And you can tell I'm trying to nestle a couple of words there on the right as well. And I suddenly realized at this point, just about now, that the center word doesn't take that much space, so I'm just making it bigger, which is always a good solution. If you have an empty space, just make something bigger. And we have a double letter there, which is going to help me distinguish where in the quote I actually am, because something distinctive like this is going to help me keep some semblance of, order. And I actually you can tell all the original big important words, they're still at the bottom of the page, because I keep backups in case I need to alter something or I need one of the original shapes. And you can tell that what I did before there was delete the existing one, take an original copy, and bring it back up because I messed something up. And what I did right there at the end there was to take the whole thing and make a copy of it, put it in its own layer, and then calling that back up. Because now, as you can see, I'm actually going to write, which means I need to destroy a lot of circles. And if I need to get back, like I did right there, I needed to get a shape back to make that concentric circle arrangement there. I need one of the original circles, which I don't have once I start writing, because I destroy the circles. So I always have a backup layer with the various original contours and stuff, so I can get back my shapes. This works as long as I don't alter the placement of the words I'm writing relative to the backup, because I need the original placement to be safe. Otherwise, I need to arrange it by hand or with snaps, and it's not always as reliable depending on what I need to get back. So at this stage, I am starting off with the big words because I want those to fit in well. So I need like everything else to kind of conform to whatever I end up doing with these, which means that I need to figure out how big they're going to be first and what space they're going to take up, and how the overall shape is going to be. So I do those first, and I am starting to think a little bit about how the lines, because it's always lines. The lines are the most complex, actually. I think the most complex part of the writing process is where do my lines go, and why. How can I incorporate my lines in a manner that works out and doesn't look weird. So I'm already thinking a little bit about how lines are going to work, and you can tell I took some backup lines there for some backup circles for my center word because I messed up the sentence circle around. I wanted to get some extra divots, and I couldn't get those because I'd already broken up the circle, so I had to make some new ones, and I took some backups. And what else we got going on? We got, some more sentence circles strewn about. I tend to, it's probably no secret by now, but I tend to make sentence circles around everything just because I use framing a lot of the time, and I think it provides the perfect frame for me. Now we're doing the overall framing, and you can tell that just by pure chance, not by deliberate planning, but it just happened to be that some of the big important words stuck out a bit too much. I made them a bit too big or something, and so instead of making them smaller, I just decided to, hey, let's make them stick out from the overall circle. It provides some interesting shapes. So what I'm doing now is I'm breaking up the string of text into actual words. Now, I do this by simply adding some extra nodes and then deleting the node segments in between. So this is pretty primitive, it's pretty rough, and it's pretty very much very point of no return. I can't alter this afterwards at all. I need to make the whole circle again and then cut it up again if I want to change anything here. So it's not a good approach, but it works for this scenario because I know where my words need to stop and I know where they need to start, and I don't plan to alter any of the distances between them or alter the word placement or anything. And you can tell I'm just going around making all the cuts now, knowing that I have a backup of all the original shapes if I need to. So it's not a big deal, but it does mean that I need to be pretty sure now how the overall composition should be, and you can already tell some of the words have very little space between them, because I did not plan adequate space between each word, but it's still readable, and honestly, if you just look for it, you can tell where the spaces are. So I'm not worried, but it just means that I didn't plan for the spaces as such, and that should probably be more of a priority another time. So at this point, I'm actually starting the process of making my lines, which is always, the most complex part. As I said, I need some backups here to get extra lines and some extra circles apparently, because because I want to do some concentric work, or at least I tried, and that required the original circle, which I lost. So I have a backup, and I'm just trying out different, like where could this line end up if it, because I tend to do arcs. I like arcs, but I need to know where that arc goes, and for this I just use enormous circles all over the screen to just kind of see where would this end up, where can I connect this, where can this lead to, um, and so I often tend to steal extra backup circles just to see how I could make a shape and where it could end it up. Um, yeah, as I went about originally, sometimes I make all the dots first, sometimes I make all the lines first. It kind of depends on my mood and the complexity of my work. For this, I didn't do anything until I came to it, so I make it up as I go along, which is pretty much my method to a T. But in this particular situation, it's because I don't know how much empty space I need to fill up before I actually arrive at it. So here you can tell, once you get a view of the entire text, you can tell where there's a lot of space and where there's not a lot of space. And I try to fill out that with whatever I can, be it circles or dots or decorations, extra divots, extra lines that don't do anything. I've done that once or twice, um, just to fill out some of that space. And it's just trial and error. In my case, I don't have a plan, so I just go along and fill out something. If I get stuck on one part of my writing, I might go to a completely different section of my writing and start over. And sometimes I just take a break, come back to it, which happens naturally because I don't have a lot of time. I had 4.5 hours on this project, which is not a lot, some would say, but it took me about a week to scrape together that time. So 4.5 hours across a week's time, give or take. Um, but nevertheless, here we are. What I'm doing here is something I quite like. When I do line modifiers and that line modifier ends on something, I sometimes make a continuation on the other side, but without connecting to anything. So you have an almost complete circle without actually affecting anything. I do that sometimes. Um, I kind of like that effect because it just adds some extra stuff to it without actually changing anything. Now I made that line purple or pink, and that's because it's a decoration line. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't affect anything, and I'm not sure at this point whether or not I actually like that it's there. Um, I sort of I like the fact that it went through all the dots, but I'm not 100% sold on it, so I just made it pink to remind myself that I have to come back to that at a later point to actually assess whether or not it has the effect that I want. Otherwise, I'm just going to delete it because it doesn't do anything. And we are into our second layer now. As I go, I sometimes do a little bit of thickness adjustments, but I tend to leave them off for later because first of all, I just need to make the piece. I can always alter the width and the strokes and whatever else I want to do later. But sometimes I immediately think to myself, this needs to be bigger, this needs to be thicker, this needs to be whatever. Maybe for emphasis, or maybe because it contrasts nicely with something. Um, and you can tell there was some red right there. Sometimes I still color code as I go. If I need to take a break from a project, I will maybe mark where I went, how far I was, and maybe I'll leave a little note to myself to tell myself, hey, this is what I was doing last time. You need to continue doing such and such. So I use colors to denote that, and sometimes I also color code what needs to be cut into what. If it's a complex, or rather, if it's a compact piece, I will take uh, different circles to be different colors so that I know that such and such needs to cut into this particular word. Um, there's not a lot of that going on here because this is, well, it's not linear, strictly speaking, but the majority of the text here written in these small arcs that make up a bigger circle. In the community, we decided to call this unfurled because we took Sherman Gallifreyan and then we sort of, well, unfurled it into a semi-straight shape, um, only divided by the gaps in the perimeter to tell one word from another. And in this case, it works quite well. It's quite compact and it's relatively easy to for making smaller words, in the sense that you can you can make pretty compact lines of text here. The downside is that you don't have the same aesthetics as you would normal circular Gallifreyan. But in this case, I'm trying to incorporate a bit of both, and I think it went pretty well. It's not something I would want to do all the time because, especially in this sort of context, well, in this workflow at least, I have to be very vigilant in what word is what, because I have uh, a lot of text. I'd say it's a pretty okay big quote. I think there's like, I haven't actually counted, two sentences, and I couldn't finish any of the words before everything else was done. Like I had to finish it all at the end. So I had to go back quite a bit and reread the quote and like retrace the individual letters and be like, okay, this is that word and this word starts here and blah blah blah. So in that sense, it's not easier to do this unfurled than it would be to do classic traditional Gallifreyan word circles, letter circles. But in when you talk about time and spacing, it's pretty efficient. Now at this point, I've come full circle, no pun intended. Yes, it was intended. And at this point, I'm actually just taking a step back and being like, okay, what looks good? This is another trial and error thing where I just go around and manipulate some of the thicknesses and the shapes to see what I like, what needs to stand out a little more, or maybe I need to take some things a bit apart or come together. Whatever needs to happen to make this look better. So that was a little demo you saw there. I took out the circle that made up all the words in Unfurled, and I broke it apart to see what could be done with it. And as I hoped for, I can manipulate the thicknesses individually, so I can make one word thicker than the other independently. Maybe I should have checked that before I started this whole thing, but it turned out it worked, so no problem. And now I'm just going around breaking up all the words so nothing is grouped together, and then I'm making some tweaks and adjustments, making up some. I've just placed the citation sign there, and I'm gonna need to put a citation sign in the middle as well to end the quote. I have you can see that in the middle there I've got the period to end the quote, but I still need the end citation mark to really finish it off properly. And you can see right now I'm just going through word for word all the way around the perimeter to check and proofread, because that's the bane of our existence. Whenever we do something, proofread, because at the end of the day, one misplaced line, one misplaced dot, anything out of order, anything scaled incorrectly, or anything like that can completely change the meaning of, well, everything. It's like a domino effect. If one line doesn't connect right, then another line might not connect right either, and then suddenly you have something that spells out completely different or just gibberish. So now I'm happy with the results so far, and I'm starting to segregate these because I have plans for the coloring, and I want the coloring of the important words to be different from the unfurled words. So I'm just doing a basic tech check here to see if everything is on the right layer. Over time, they tend to blur the lines a little bit about what lies where, because it's just black and white, so I can't tell. I'm just making this quick adjustment to place everything where I want it, so that when I manipulate the layers, if I do that, I have everything I need on the right layer. So that's done, and that prepares me for the actual some of the effects I want to do. Before I completely go ahead and make colors, I'm going to make some changes to some of the thicknesses. I'm applying some of my classic stuff, the power stroke, one of the most essential tool of any Inkscape user, at least if you do Gallifreyan artwork. And it's pretty minimal here actually, because I don't want every line to be all over the place. A lot of these lines are actually just straight, and that's fine. But now it's time to actually do the conversion, and this takes some time. There are quite a few nodes, quite a few objects, so this is sped up, of course, but I think in reality it took close to a minute to actually make that conversion. So this is just a further proofread, and I'm doing a check to see if the conversion went successfully. You can tell there are two instances here, particularly with the one of the effect is called taper stroke, and this doesn't play ball really well with the stroke to path and object to path operations. So I need to redo those, because it turns the fill into a stroke and then makes that into a fill after that. But now we have arrived at the section where you can tell I'm color coding some of the things. I'm unioning them together in sections, so I have control over what needs to go where, and just sort of giving myself an overview of what I have and how it fits together, and starting to mess around with some colors. I had a pretty good idea that I wanted to do some dark grays and some faint greens to accentuate. So this is what I'm doing here, roughly outlining the different colors, just to see if it works as well in real life as it did in my head. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes my head cannot um, keep up with reality. But in this case, with some subtle additions and some tweaks, it actually does look rather much like I wanted it to. So I'm just doing the whole unfurled segment is just one big path now. So I'm applying one single gradient, and the different important words all have their own separate segments. So it's individually applied whenever I do some work on those, which means I have greater control over how it looks and it doesn't look so uniform. So I'm just taking a step back and looking at this, and it looks pretty okay.